Apa kira-kira bisa langsung di-admit itu yang anu, Pak?
Ya, silahkan bisa.
Langsung aja ya ini ya.
Ya, sudah lengkap di sini.
Ya.
Sudah banyakkah Pak Agus?
Ya.
Sudah banyakkah?
Ini ada 8, baru 10.
Kita bisa tunggu sebentar Pak Reza ya. Prof. Al?
Yes.
Regarding your material, could you copy?
Would you like for me to put on the screen?
No, maybe you can share.
Are we starting?
No, not yet. We will wait the others maybe in 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay. I can.
Be patient.
Host disable participant screen sharing, so it's a bit later.
Ya, bagus, tolong.
Okay, I will change you to become the co-host, Prof.
Yeah.
Okay.
Host disable participant screen sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You become co-host now, and you can
Gak bisa, Pak
put
Agus,
the screen.
harus di disable aja. Co-hostnya nggak bisa juga untuk share.
Oh ya, terus gimana?
Di enable dulu, di enable share screen-nya.
Share screen-nya di
disable.
Di disable ya. Ini. Oke, bisa.
Oh, udah.
Oke, ya.
Do you see it?
Ya.
Ya.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Cognitive science, rethinking design.
Three minutes more. Pak Agung BS itu hostnya, malah nggak kelihatan.
Architecture and cognitive science. Contemporary. Rethinking design. What the? Halo?
Halo,
200. Bukan. Iya, sesudah itu jadi 200. Iya. Iya. Oke. Iya.
Mas Reza, bisa kita mulai?
Ya, siap.
Ini
Prof,
nampaknya
Prof Almantas, can you change me become host because I must admit the participant who will join this occasion.
Oh, what should I do?
You can. I'm sorry, I changed you become host because there is no co-host. You can choose Augustinus Matiana Putra and then choose more. Please click more and
just a moment. I'm not good at these things, you know.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry, this is some accident here.
New share.
More, yeah, Augustinus, more, and then please press make me become a host again.
Is it okay? No.
Right now I'm not yet become host yet. Please in my name Augustinus Matiana Putra. In the you can put your cursor in my name, and then there is two option, mute or more, and please click more, and
Just
then
a moment.
yeah.
I don't know.
I'm sorry. Please click more and then.
It doesn't open. I don't know.
Yeah, enter your screens and
Admit.
Admit. Yeah. There is more participant will join. No, if you put me become the host so that I can do the admit to admit to the people who want to join here.
But I don't know how to do it. I don't know.
Okay.
I can stop sharing at the moment.
Yeah. You can stop sharing first.
Stop.
Okay. And then you choose me become a host again.
Gitu ya. Ini soalnya hostnya juga amatiran ya.
Iya Ibu, mohon maaf ini baru latihan. Biasanya kan ada co-host, ini tanpa co-host, jadi tadi saya klik Prof Almantas langsung beliau jadi host. Waduh, ini pada beliau ini enter screen. Oke. Aduh. Jadi beliau yang nanti mengadmit orang-orang yang mau masuk itu. Iki.
Admitting all kalau enggak masuk lagi.
Admit to all. Caranya gimana Mas Reza?
Prof Almantasnya harus admitting all dulu, kita masuk lagi semua.
Oh, iya. Apa jenengan kontak Prof Almantas, tapi nanti jadi ini. Jadi nanti berhenti semua.
Prof Al?
Yes.
Could you stop?
Stop sharing.
Yeah.
Sharing.
And in the bottom of your screen, there's a participants. You may
participants. Yes.
Yes. You can pick that participant first. Post press, and then in the next in the right column, there's a participants there.
Yes. Augustinus.
Yes, you can choose Augustinus, and there's more button.
More. Yes.
Put it. Then
make host.
Yeah, correct.
Make host. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Correct. Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Is this okay?
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Prof. I'm nervous. Yeah. Okay, and then how to?
Okay, then we can start now. Can we start?
Yeah. Okay. Can we start now? Okay. Maybe from me first. Yeah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Good morning, Prof. Al. Yeah. Very firstly, let's pray to God Almighty because of His blessing we could be here to meet again in this academic meeting, lecturing session. Yeah, actually, this is a part of program of visiting professor that organized by Department of Architecture, Engineering Faculty, Diponegoro University, that have been conducted from the mid of September to the mid of November. And thanks God, this afternoon we can invite Professor Almantas Samalavicius, a professor from Vilnius, Gediminas, Technological Lithuania. Thank you, Prof. Al, for your willingness to join us. And of course, in this meeting, also I would like to say thank you for moderator Pak Reza, and also all of participants who has joined in this meeting. Okay, this meeting will run around 1.5 hours, and I will invite Pak Reza to lead this meeting as a moderator. Pak Reza, time is yours. Thank you. Enjoy the lecturing session. Thank you.
Thank you, Bati. Well, our honorable speakers, Prof. Almantas, our distinguished guests, lecturers, fellow students, and ladies and gentlemen for this evening. Good afternoon, good morning also for Pak Almantas. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I would like to welcome you all in this prestigious program of visiting professor held by the Department of Architecture. And it is my pleasure to be moderator for this program in this second chance. It's also my honor to get our speaker today, Prof. Almantas, for this time. And this opportunity, he will share about his topics of architecture and cognitive science, thinking about design. In a short while, we will start the program by the presentations. But before that, I would like to give a short introduction of him. Even we have already know him well, actually. Dr. Almantas Samalavicius is PhD in architectural history and theory. He's full professor in Vilnius Gediminas Technical University, Department of Architectural Fundamentals, Theory and Arts, and he is Chief Research Associate of the Institute of Architecture. He teaches architectural criticism, aesthetic of architecture, theory of urban culture, and supervises doctoral dissertations. He is author of 14 books and an editor of some 12 volumes of academic architecture and essay published in Lithuania, United Kingdom, and USA. And he was a visiting professor and scholar at Alumni University at Chichego, Helsinki University, Kyungpok National University of South Korea, Seville University, Alcalá University, University des Países Vasco in Spain, Florence University, IAUV University, and Universitas Diponegoro, Indonesia. And he also editor-in-chief of the Journal of Architecture and Urbanism and Lithuania's Quarterly, Chichego, USA. So I will give the chance for Professor to give his lecture for 30 until 1 hour, in the next 1.5 hours. So please, for Prof. Almantas, the time is yours.
Excuse me, Pak Reza, before we start the meeting, can we take a picture together?
Oh, okay. So we have a picture first, photos.
Pak Agus, bisa bantu?
Sudah, Bu.
Sudah, oke.
Sudah.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Reza.
Okay.
Time is yours.
Yes, well,
Thank you.
Time is yours. Please, you can share your screen now.
Okay. Yeah, I hope now that you see my screen.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I must admit that I started using this Zoom technology since spring, but I still don't feel at home, you know. I don't feel like giving a normal lecture, you know, because I see only the screen. I used to deal with technology when I had a program on national TV, you know, some 10 years ago, but this is absolutely different, you know. So, okay, so let me now turn to the subject matter. Well, perhaps I would like to introduce the subject itself. Why do we speak about architecture and cognitive sciences? And my comment about the title of this lecture is that, in fact, there is an upcoming revolution in cognitive sciences. Never before we knew we had so much information about human beings, about how human beings deal with their environment and how we react to built and natural environment. And of course, there are branches, different branches of sciences that are providing a lot of knowledge today. However, for numerous reasons, in architecture and urbanism, many things go still as usual. And of course, it is not easy to explain why, because we are also dealing with a very big burden. As you see, this is the picture. It's one of the pictures I took in Bangkok, and to me, it's extremely horrible. It's, however, it's our environment in which we live. These days. And actually, 100 years ago, people did not live in such an environment. So let me continue by stating that relationship between arts and sciences has been extremely awkward, also ambiguous throughout the last century. We know when modernism came into being in the early 20s and 30s of the last century, the pioneers of modernism, they often claimed that their view of art and their view of architecture was very close to that one of scientific research. However, when we now follow how things developed in the last century, we see that in most cases, except a few moments, sciences and arts developed separately. And today, the ambiguities of modernist architecture and the legacy of modernist architecture is well known, where there are lots of books, critical books, which discuss, so to say, in what kind of environment we live today, and what are the causes, what are, so to say, the aesthetic, the social, and the technical causes of this mess in which we are finding ourselves. So despite of the fact that vanguard modern architects insisted that they were creating spaces for the future, urban spaces especially, the built environment, and especially cities shaped by modernist paradigm, turned out to be extremely flawed and even disastrous in their consequence, both to individuals and their communities. We know, and I hope everyone who is interested in the developments of architectural and urban developments of the last century knows this famous story of Brute Ego quarters. There was a extremely modernist and exemplary living quarters in St. Louis, USA. However, in 1972, these quarters, they were taken away, they were blown up, and all the books are full of pictures of how they are blowing these blocks, because it turned out that this modernist environment was first of all generating crime. It was creating an unlivable psychological and social environment. And actually, very many architectural historians call it the end of modernism. So it happened already in 1972, but unfortunately, we are still living in the environment that was created by the social programming and aesthetical doctrines of modernism. We can remember, of course, the teaching of Le Corbusier and his ideas of the glass screen facades, so-called les fenêtres longueurs in French, as he once described them. Actually, we see these screens everywhere, in all the large cities, in South and the North. You see them all in the center of cities, in downtowns. And they are not that much different from their early modernist prototypes. So, though the end of modernism was proclaimed several decades ago, modernist practices, they persist to the very day. And of course, there had been numerous consequences enforced upon human beings, upon the dwellers of cities, during the reign of modernism throughout the last century. Now, let me quote Barbara Erwin. She is an American architectural scholar, and she's also a chemist by profession before she graduated architecture. She has written a very interesting book called Creating Sensory Spaces, where she notes that the modern era, the modern period, was marked by a phenomenon known as sensory deprivation. So, because of the hegemony of the eye, or the dominance of sight in human culture, which came into being due to Renaissance discovery of the two-point perspectives and the visual representation of the building in plan, section, and elevation, actually the eyesight started to dominate in contemporary Western culture. However, before Western Renaissance, the human species was far more focused on other senses. First of all, on smell and on hearing, on smell and sounds. Though the Greek antique philosopher Aristotle insisted that human sight is the most highly developed among all human senses, as it is in the sense of clear thinking and the sense of mind, it did not dominate culture until the change of perceptual paradigm in early modern period. Now, actually, I included a few photos, mostly from big cities. This is a huge building in Vilnius, in the city where I live. It's a prize-winning building and headquarters of a large bank. And actually, you can see a lot, you know, and such buildings actually they are built for the eye. You can't smell, you can't even touch this building because it has a very flat surface. It's glass and metal actually. It's the same. It's the picture of Vilnius city center, new city center, you know, where you see all these large glass building. And of course, you know, when you look at some of them, you know, the images are very nice. The images are very nice when you look at them on the screen, when you look at them in the architectural journal. But when you find yourself among these buildings, immediately you have a sense that this is only, they are designed for the sight only. They are designed for the eyes only. They are designed for producing effect on just one of our human senses. Actually, so sights like this, they ignore smell, they ignore touch, they ignore hearing, they exalt, and they actually allow human sight to dominate. So Barbara Erwin goes on in her book to suggest that this bias, let me repeat, visual bias, is reinforced by the most architectural publications today and design competitions which present images of projects usually without people in them. And they focus on the space from a single point perspective. So actually 500 years have passed since Renaissance, since the discovery of perspective, but actually we are still playing the same game because of the primacy of I, because of the importance of the sight. So this cultural and disciplinary exaltation of sight and image consequently creates a distance, even a gap between the mental construct of design and our multisensorial physical world in which we live. We live in the world which we understand by all our senses, not just by the sight exclusively. However, we are regularly, because of contemporary modernist architecture, we are regularly forced to rely on our eyes, on our sight exclusively. And this attitude reinforces culture and even the cult of an image, suggesting, we know now the term called iconic architecture. Iconic architecture is just architecture which is produced for our eyes, for the consumption of our sight, not for any other purposes. And they suggest that none of the senses and human experiences can rival the power or the sight and of an eye. Finnish architect and internationally renowned architectural theorist Juhani Palasma, actually he has written about a dozen of books in recent some 20 years, very important books. They are now studied all over architectural schools in the West, especially, but also in other places. And he has introduced a perspective which is actually related to philosophical phenomenology. So he uses, so to say, the findings of phenomenology and applies them to architecture. In one of his books written some 10 years ago, a small book, but very, very enlightening book called The Embodied Image, Palasma claims that images are produced and deployed ad infinitum for purposes of information, education, and entertainment, as well as commercial, ideological, or political manipulation, including architecture. Our physical world, our cityscapes and natural settings, as well as our mental landscape, are colonized today by the image industry. Recent neurological studies, however, have greatly advanced the understanding of our brain and neural processes in perceiving, recalling, and imagining images. But even this advanced research information is already utilized for the purposes of developing increasingly canny strategies and methods in advertising and commercial conditioning. So what he in fact implies that we have now very important resources, scientific resources, but these resources are not that much applied to creating a different living environment in our cities, but they are mostly used by various visual media like advertising, which actually makes a very fast and a very good use of this finding, and in fact uses this against us, so to say, commercializing our environment. Now, of course, all these tendencies, all these development, they have their own history. And this peculiar development that led to the ascent of the image has been studied by various historians, philosophers, as well as art and architectural historians. Actually, I rely very strongly on historian and philosopher Ivan Illich, who died in 2002. He has written extremely important books that allow us to understand, so to say, the effects of modernity on our institutions, on our, so to say, preferences of the last age. He has observed in his essay, Guarding the Eye in the Age of Show, that the image of the eye is not a fact of nature, but rather a constitutive characteristics of one particular stage in Western culture. And this stage is, of course, modernity. Before modernity, in the Middle Ages, of course, the eye was not a dominant aspect in human culture. So Ivan Illich acknowledged the fact that the domination of the visual had inevitable consequences on human perception. That is well documented in dictionaries. He gives a very telling example from the German language. And of course, the dictionaries show us a lot what is happening in culture. So he notes that from 158 words in the German language, he studied German language, and actually he was a polyglot. He could speak 10 languages himself. He notes that this big number was used to indicate various variations of smell, just smell alone. Imagine 160 words that depict, so to say, various human smells. This was in the age of Renaissance, when painter Albrecht Dürer lived, and only 1/3, so it is about 50 words remain in contemporary use. So actually it implies that the words disappear with changes in the balance of the human senses. However, I think we all understand that architecture, unlike some other visual media, for example, like painting or like advertisement, is not simply an image. Because buildings are structures and places where people dwell, where people move, where people pray, sleep, eat, and actually perform any possible daily routines and duties throughout their lives. More than that, buildings are not abstract spaces, as they are often presented in architectural designs. They are always related to concrete places. And these places, of course, have relation to all forms of human experiences. So in this essay, in this important essay already quoted, philosopher and historian Ivan Illich explains current image domination as a historical phenomena that has evolved in a special context. He notes, let me now give another quotation, since the 16th century, the gaze seems incapable of neglecting the image. For several centuries now, our eyes have ceased to be windows through which the world comes to us. We read light points on the retina. It was Johannes Kepler, a Western scientist, who mounted a cow's eye in the apparatus and discovered that it worked like a camera obscura. Since then, the eye is no longer the gate through which the things enter the soul, as they believed until the end of Middle Ages, but is the instrument by which, with the help of which, images are imprinted. So this particular shift in the scopic regime, exalted by modernist design practice, created a culture that was finally targeted by architectural theorists and philosophers, especially in the second half of the 20th century. There were, however, some timely and dissenting scholars. For example, famous Danish architect and architectural theorist Steen Eiler Rasmussen attempted to reorient the contemporary understanding of architecture in his now classical volume titled Experiencing Architecture. This book was first published in 1959 and has been reprinted, I think, more than 30 times. It was published by Massachusetts Institute of Technology publishing house, and is now standard textbook in very many architectural schools over the globe. In this book, Rasmussen argued that architecture is open to all aspects of human experience and involves not only sight, which is exalted in Western culture, but also other senses such as hearing, touching, and of course smell. He rightly observed that we get an enormous amount of information about buildings from sensing the buildings with the help of our hands and the feeling of tactility, as well through the sense of hearing. And in fact, actually, this very early observation was recently confirmed by a Nobel Prize winner, Eric Kandel, who notes that only half of the sensory information going to the brain is visual. So actually 50% of information that is projected to our brain is of non-visual origin. However, the architecture of the 20th century claimed that it's only the sight that is important. It's only the image that is important. Moreover, this was always a part of architectural experience, so to say, the ability to rely on hearing, the ability to rely on touch, was a part of architectural experience prior to the arrival of modernism, which in fact reduced architectural experience to one and only sense of sight. And thus, the image became alpha and omega of architectural design. Alpha and omega are the first and the last words in the dictionary. So by this metaphor, I want to say that now, in the end of 20th century, the sight has been, so to say, hegemonic. Despite of topicality of Rasmussen's attitude towards architectural experience, his views remained for a long time somewhat isolated until recent decades, when the interest in phenomenology of architecture was triggered and developed by such authors as Christian Norberg Schulz and his famous book Genius Loci, and other architectural theorists who explored various ways in which architecture is interpreted and understood by human beings. And though I won't go deeper into the issues of architectural phenomenology in this lecture, this particular attitude enabled to have a broader view of how architecture and the built environment is being perceived by human beings. Now, two contemporary authors, very important contemporary authors, actually Michael McAfee, he is a former student of Christopher Alexander, and Nikos Alingaros, who is a mathematician by profession, but has now become a very important architectural and urban theorist with more than 10 published books. In their joint book titled Design for a Living Planet, that was published 5 years ago, they have described contemporary design culture that is characterized by, first of all, geometrical fundamentalism. They say that the march of technological progress inevitably compels the elimination of detailed or ornamental features. It focuses on features that nakedly display and celebrate technological expediency and geometrical reduction. The other aspect of contemporary design culture is tectonic determinism. The geometric character of any addition to the built environment can only be a unique expression of its own specific technological moment in history, which is defined only in stylistic terms. Now, the current design culture is based on typological prejudice. It follows that all previous geometries of all the eras are wholly inconsistent with modernity and must be marked for elimination. Revival, a constant evolutionary fougue through the greatest civilization, is now rejected for the first time in human history. And lastly, modernism is based on exceptionalism. Civilizations have arrived at a fundamentally different and superior culture status, elevated beyond previous historical constraints by its powerful technology. And at the moment, architecture still serves this technology most appropriately by drawing from limited form language derived formally in the 20th century production technology. No other language, no traditional language is any longer valid or authentic, only, so to say, the modernist style. As both authors rightly conclude, the consequences of this domination, of course, were industrial parts. These were blank flat sheets, razor straight cuts, cubes and cylinders, which I showed you already in the pictures. They standardized to allow easy and low-cost assembly. However, human experience derived from architecture was narrowed and limited to the utmost. These limitations, however, were ideologically praised, elevated, and even worshipped. So until very recently, modernism pretended it had a monopoly over scientific outlook. However, findings in various scientific disciplines during the last decades, several decades, provide quite the contrary, that modernist aesthetics was biased, it was confused, it was detached from what cognitive sciences have discovered about human brain and their relationship to the environment. It is well known that neuroscience is a fast developing field of research, providing exciting insights into understanding how human brain works and how our relations with the environment are structured. The development of neuroscience was accelerated in the 1970s by invention of functional brain imaging technology, and it was made possible to observe how humans deal with their sensations, emotions, and behavior. Neurosciences have progressed, especially during the last 2 decades, and a new field known as neuroaesthetics has come into being, especially due to the efforts of English scientist Semirski. John Eberhard emphasizes in his book, Architecture and the Brain, the importance of a theory that has founded that human favor perception that provides pleasure. Such scientists as Irving Biederman and Edward Wessel, they argue that the brain is hardwired for pleasure. They believe that they have identified a system in the brain that is based on cellular and molecular mechanism that encourage us to seek information by rewarding us with the sensation of pleasure. So this information can be as diverse as a view of pleasant landscape or a conversation with a good friend. So their theory proposes that a rate of endomorphin releases in the area of the brain called parahippocampal cortex determines, at least partially, the human preference for the experience that is novel and interpretable. Eberhard rightly insists, let me now quote his book, there is a compelling evidence that architecture is on the threshold of knowledge revolution, equal to the one experienced by the medical profession in the late 18th century. The introduction of an expanded knowledge base from neuroscience will likely require introducing additional changes into architectural education. The methods and models used in neuroscience research will become drivers of reform in education of architects. Architectural accreditation and licensure will potentially institutionalize this new knowledge base. And the change in education will mean that professional practice will become less protective to design decisions and successes. Coming back to Michael McAfee and Nikos Salingaros, they provide their view that concords with the quotation presented above. According to McAfee and Salingaros, the evidence provided by neuroscience, as well as other fields of aesthetic experience research, confirms that this aesthetic experience structures is not superficial psychological aspect, but rather a kind of cognitive gateway allowing us to experience and to react to this deeper order of our environment. The artistic dimension lies in the way this gateway is shaped, and it is in resonance with other emotional experiences in life. Creative abstractions are added, but not replaced, the natural complexity of our world. And as conscientious artists working in order to improve the human environment, our role is to enhance, to express and clarify this complex adaptive order. Now, let me switch to the main, so to say, subject of my talk. It is how neuroaesthetics has rediscovered beauty. As I have mentioned, that neuroaesthetics is one of the new branches of science. It was created by neurologist and first and foremost Semirski. And here we see a very famous Western illustration. It's a drawing by Leonardo da Vinci. It's a drawing of a human figure. What is most important, actually, he used this picture, this drawing, so to say, to help us understand how human body, how the symmetry of the human body is important. And actually, though he is the author of this famous drawing, but the relation between human body and architecture was well known before Renaissance, before Leonardo da Vinci presented this drawing. And now the neuroaesthetics confirms that symmetry and many other things that were known to the ancient architects have, so to say, scientific background. So since the ascent of modernism in the 20th century, the concept of beauty was largely compromised, and at its best it was viewed only from the point of view of art and architectural history. So the modernist theories claim that the idea of beauty is and should be contested. Moreover, the universal validity of beauty was not acknowledged. Cultural pluralism questioned Western supremacy and universalism, as well as its concepts, except, of course, the universalism of modernism that was never questioned. So this elimination of the concept of beauty from artistic and architectural discourse was challenged when neurobiologists turned their eyes on art. As early as 2003, researchers Hideaki Kawabata and Semirski, they both come from the University College London, carried out their experiment with the students' perception. During this study, they presented 300 paintings to the participants who were asked to rank them in the spectrum between the most beautiful and the most ugly. And they had to evaluate these pictures under the scale of 1 to 10. So the experiments did not intend to find any standard of beauty. Instead, researchers tried to find if the categorization of ugly and beautiful left some distinct neurological footprint. So the latter was confirmed. And what was even more interesting, Kawabata and Zeki found out that the paintings perceived as ugly, they activated bilateral areas of the motor cortex previously associated with visual stimuli related to fear. So perception of ugly or seemingly dangerous fear-inflicting human faces. Meanwhile, beautiful paintings showed activity in orbitofrontal cortex, in the other part of human brain. And such experiments were further carried out by other groups of scientists in other countries, for example, Canada. And continued effort in this direction allowed Semirski to conclude that there can be no satisfactory theory of aesthetic that is not neurologically based. And of course, some earlier theories were very exact, but simply they were based on, so to say, experience and intuition. But now we have scientific evidence provided by experiments. And actually, Semirski concluded this in his article, Artistic Creativity and the Brain. Now, in the year 1999, a well-known neurobiologist, Ramachandran, and philosopher William Hinstein insisted that there are some universal rules and principles in the visual arts, and they are related to neurological reasons. Among these rules was perceptual grouping, isolation of targeting attention, symmetry, as well as visual metaphor. So in fact, in this article, they proposed 8 laws of artistic experience that are used by artists, either consciously or subconsciously, to have some effects on visual areas of the brain. So the finding of Ramachandran and Hirstein showed that some artworks have capacity to stimulate and at the same time to rouse the human brain. Meanwhile, other works of art do not produce the same effect. In his book, Architecture and Embodiment, American Architecture Theories, Harry Francis Malgrave, actually I conducted a conversation with him and published in one of my books. Malgrave mentions a study focused on architecture. The group of 11 architects and the group of non-professionals, the same group, 11 professionals and 11 non-professionals were given about 170 images of buildings against 168 images of human faces for appraisal. And the expectation was that architects will evaluate these buildings differently than non-architects. In fact, this experiment confirmed the expectations. Architects and non-architects appraised the same faces with similar neural patterns in the visual and lower temporal cortex. But when seeing the buildings, architects' brain activity was far greater than the non-architects. So this gives, of course, a lot of implication to think about design and designers. In one of his most recent articles directly related to the issues with architecture and beauty, Semirski, let me repeat again that he's the founder of a new scientific field called Neuroaesthetics. He says that the artworks or aesthetical objects have some common characteristics despite differences of cultural traditions. Let me now quote Zeki. According to Zeki, the experience of beauty, regardless, whatever its source is sensory, whether derived from joy or sorrow, whether moral or highly cognitive, mathematical, correlates with heightened neural activity in the specific part of emotional brain. It's known as field A1 of the media orbitofrontal cortex. It's an activity that is proportional to the declared intensity of the aesthetic experience. And this leads him to suggest that the experience of beauty can be quantified. Zephyr further suggests that beauty can guide architects as well, because beauty is an objective experience to the experiencing individual. This further implies that there is or might be some common guiding elements that is pan-cultural and dictates the experience of architectural beauty. It's some kind of sensus communis that would enable the architect to suppose that what he or she regards as beautiful would have universal assent, or nearly so, among other human beings. It means that the experience of beauty is less subjective than was generally thought. Such phenomenon as biological beauty exists, and it extends from the experience of color to the experience of the human bodies. For example, we have objective, so to say, attitude towards colors, towards human faces, towards human figures. And biological experience, of course, occurs due to the inherited brain concepts that are largely universal between different human cultures. And because of that, mathematical relations can partially explain the experiences of facial and corporeal body, where symmetry, balance, and precise relationship between parts are of utmost importance. So Zeki, let me conclude. Zeki places architectural beauty into the artifactual category, as there is no inherited brain concept of buildings or beautiful buildings. But since humans have a very close experience of nature, this influences, so to say, their attitude towards other parts in the environment. And thus he concludes that there is a heavy dose of biological beauty dependent on our inherited brain concepts that regulates architectural design, and also that the sense of beauty is not as subjective as it might seem, or as we were told throughout the 20th century. He concludes his essay. The experience of pleasure, reward, and desire are central to the emotional brain, and specifically field 1 of the MOFC. When one considers that decision-making is also linked to activity there, one reaches the inevitable conclusion that beauty must be a guiding characteristics in all designs that aim to enhance human experience. Hence, whatever other demands go into architectural design, economic, social, or whatever, beauty must be a central element. Its experience adds to the health of individuals and accordingly to society's well-being. Now, I wanted to show you a few images. You know, you don't need to belong to Western culture to realize that these images are beautiful, because human figures, they are proportional. Here the human face is very proportional. Now let me show some more images. This is one of the churches in Venice, in Italy, and this is stupa in Myanmar. They are very different objects, but we can comprehend them as beautiful without knowing much about the symbolism or about, so to say, traditions between these countries, because our eyes, our senses are able to comprehend the common beauty. Here is the picture I took in Iran. It's the famous Fin Garden. One of the most beautiful and prototypical gardens created in Muslim culture. You see here the symmetry, so to say, and also the screens of water. They appeal to our senses. And so to say, we don't need to be Muslims in order to realize how beautiful these objects are. This is, I think, my last picture. These are two architectural details. This is the dome of Vilnius St. Peter and Paul's Church. It's a Baroque church, very famous Baroque church in Vilnius. And in the picture on the right, you see part of a mosque in Isfahan in Iran. These are extremely different cultural traditions. But as I have already mentioned, we can experience the beauty of each of these subjects because we have a common denominator. And this denominator is in our brain. It is in our human experience. So now let me get back to the picture I saw. I showed you already in the beginning of the lecture. We have seen at the end some remarkable and very beautiful buildings, but we continue to live in the environment of this extremely shapeless and ugly building because the modernist aesthetics of the 20th century preferred this building. They claimed that architectural and art, so to say, experience is subjective, that any architect or any artist can have his own vision, and we have to believe it. So let me now conclude my talk that I have managed, of course, to cover just only a small portion of what is going on in, so to say, neuroaesthetics and generally in the brain sciences. And I believe that if architects and architectural theorists will take this research seriously, we might expect in the coming decades some serious changes in architecture. Of course, architects are not the ones who are solely responsible for this built environment, because there is building industry, but architects can contribute with trying to understand what's going on with human brain and, so to say, our senses. So thank you for the attention. If you have any questions, I will be happy to reply to them.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Al. It's very interesting presentation, I guess, because you give us some another perspective how we see an architecture from the science of a brain, right? Some science of neuroscience brain here. And what I conclude here is you were mentioned that our architecture is moved even since our avant-garde until the modernism, but it always has a basis on the visual aesthetic, and then how about if the architecture can be also seen from the others from the neuroscience, which not only can we see from the visuals, we have a responsible how we can contribute to understand what the human brain will affect to our architecture. This is what I can conclude here. Maybe if from the participant have some questions, you can ask directly. If there's no,
I just want to add one more remark. In fact, the advances in neurosciences just confirm very many things that we knew in traditional architecture, in classical architecture. Because architects in the older generations, in the ancient generations, they have arrived with the same conclusions like the brain science comes today. Simply, there is confirmation that a lot that what existed, so to say, historically, is grounded. We only tried to change it because of this avant-garde folly. During the last 100 years, we tried to destroy our environment.
Yeah, what I also saw from your presentation that you also mentioned about the Erwin, which is I guess it's also have the same perspective with Palasma on his book of The Eye of the Skin, which is the visual is not merely is the most important to understand architecture. I have some question actually. Do you think that our future architecture will change when we have found a technology that can improve the architecture into the neuroscience? I mean,
I don't think I would not rely on technologies because there is a lot of evidence that contemporary technologies produce materials which are far more inferior than the traditional ones. I recently read a book by my Italian colleague who compares buildings that were built 100 years ago in Rome and the buildings that are being built today. And contemporary buildings, despite that we have far more advanced technology, they don't compete with the old buildings. And these older quarters, now they have a very high value in the market because for about 100 years, they did not need very much refurbishment with these traditional buildings built out of bricks and traditional technologies. I have belief not in the technologies, but perhaps in sciences that simply provide us more evidence that the general direction of, so to say, organizing the built environment in the 20th century was wrong. Of course, I understand that they were not, it's not only because of the designers, there were a lot of social problems and, this expansion of cities, the growth of cities, unprecedented growth of cities, of course, it required very fast solutions. But generally, our environment created during this 100 years, it's extremely ugly and horrible. And of course, if little by little, there will be, of course, more findings, and not only, of course, in neuroscience, also in psychology and other fields. There is a very interesting book called Cognitive Architecture. So there is now a field which is known as cognitive architecture. Of course, they differ in different cultures because cognition is not absolutely universal. You have different, so to say, versions of cognitive capacities in different cultures, but still there are some general, so to say, things that work in our brain. And if we try to understand how our environment works on us, we can produce far better designs.
So can we see that this cognitive science is also related with the interdisciplinary thinking? I mean, architecture is no longer.
Yes, and actually, I spoke last time. I spoke about biophilic architecture. So there is a new trend which is now known as biophilic architecture. It is also very strongly based on neurology and findings of neurosciences. Because they use it. They try to understand how we react to nature, how we react to natural objects. And then this is transposed to our built environment. Because we often forget that we are biological beings. Of course, we have brains, but we are biological beings, and we have evolved actually in hundreds, thousands of years. And we came, so to say, we originated in nature. So there is a very, so to say, strong predisposition in our minds and in our bodies as well. We know that, a human body does not feel well in some surroundings, and in some surroundings it feels pretty okay. This is our, so to say, everyday observation.
So will the everyday practice will become the basis of future architecture? I mean, where we can no longer have to visual as a main concern in architecture.
And I also believe that in some 10 years we will have compulsory courses I don't know how they will be called. Maybe they call the courses of neuroaesthetics or just the courses of architectural aesthetics, but they will, so to say, present the knowledge and information we get from neurosciences. This is inevitable because it explains a lot of how we feel and how we live.
Mm. Yeah, it is a good discussion in the future. Actually, we have another one question here from Bu Jayanti in the chat box. She asks about when art's used in the design process of building, is that means that design has a sense of neuroscience also, or
could you repeat? Could you repeat, please again?
When art used in the design process of a building, is that means that design has a sense of neuroscience? I guess she asks about is design is actually neuroscience thinking. I mean, the originally this description of design is neuroscience, basically.
I don't know. I don't know. Perhaps I did not understand the question very
Bu
well.
Jayanti, maybe you can explain. Bu Jayanti, are you here? Maybe you can give a future questions.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Pak Reza. Yeah. As far as I know from Prof. Almantas explained in the beginning that arts is important to be paid attention in design process. Is that right? Yeah. So is that any relation between arts and neurosciences?
Of course, of course, of course.
Yeah.
And you know, often artists, they work in an intuitive way. And intuition often brings us to a very interesting solutions that are confirmed by the brain sciences as well. I think there was a problem during the last century that individual aesthetics was taken for granted, that anything goes, anything can be art. And I've seen lots of ugly versions of art, you know, so not each and every piece of art nourishes our brain and our emotions. There are different types of art, and some of this art somehow provides positive emotions to us, and there are types of art that actually oppresses our brain, I would say.
Okay. That means that arts in architecture about beauty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because we know that Vitruvius said that three main aspect of architecture is one of them is about beauty. Does that mean arts?
You know, beauty, of course, beauty is another theoretical, very serious theoretical object about which we could talk, and philosophical concept. But actually, throughout 20th century, there were no discussions of beauty. It was abandoned as a kind of old-fashioned concept that no longer applies to contemporary situation and the interest of the arts and architecture, to that matter. But you see, the findings of neuroaesthetics, they show that concepts of beauty are extremely important. Because we are driven, biologically, we are driven towards beauty. We like people who are beautiful. We are like natural landscapes who are beautiful. And let me remind you, when I gave the lecture last time, there is a classical already research. This was already discovered in the 19th of the last century, when Roger Ulrich found out that the people who are ill in the hospitals, they start so to say get healthy much faster when they have beautiful sights from the window. You see, a very simple thing, a beautiful sight, just a window, and it affects our beauty. So think about how all the environment, what kind of effect it has on our bodies, on our brain, on our emotions.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
And it also related with our sensory, right? I mean, sensory will become the main concern here in neuroscience, as neuroscience.
It means
Now, unfortunately, in 5 minutes, I have to join another meeting.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah, okay.
okay. Thank you very much,
Okay,
Prof.
very much.
Almantas.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe okay. That's another last question, I guess. When he is from Putri Iskandar, is beauty if beauty is the major element or the functional dimension? I mean, functional aspects in architecture is also important as beauty.
Of course, functional aspects are very important, because buildings, are not buildings or dwellings are not just built to enjoy them. And, when I'm giving a course in architectural aesthetics, I try to tell my graduate students that we live in buildings, we pray in buildings, we eat, we sleep in buildings. They have a function in our lives, and they should be understood as such. So actually, utility and beauty, this combination, what is architecture all about?
Yeah, I guess it's really be
No,
important.
architecture is not a painting. Architecture is not a photo, and architecture is not a sculpture. It's not a three-dimensional sculpture because we live in it.
Yeah. I guess we got what your point here, that neuroscience and architecture is not about the beauty itself, but it's also about the functional aspects. But the neuroscience will be effective. It will be the future of architecture, I guess, because we're not talking, and also it related with our sensory. And I guess that's the point of the neuroscience here. Okay, maybe that's the last questions, and because you also have to go to another meeting, so I guess this is the end of this sessions, and I'm very thank you for your presentation. Maybe in the next time we can also have another discussions of other themes. So I'll give the time back to Bu Ati for the closing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Almantas. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Reza, and also Prof. Almantas for the nice presentation. Yeah, actually, it's left many questions in my mind, and my mind also. Actually, I would like to say question, but it's okay. I will ask to Prof. By myself. Okay. Of course, thank you very much for your presentation, and to our audience, please give a big applause to Prof. Al for this session, for his share knowledge. Okay, please. Okay, thank you, Prof. Al, and dear audience, I would like to invite Pak Agung Budi, the head of Department of Architecture Engineering Faculty, Diponegoro University, to give closing remark. Pak Agung, please. Dr. Agung. Where Pak Agung is? Pak Agung. Okay.
My mic.
Thank you, Pak Agung.
Thank you, Bu Ati. Thank you, Prof. Almantas, for your sharing. Alhamdulillah, this event has gone well. There are interesting topic and interesting discuss. But unfortunately, the time is so short. And again, thanks to Prof. Almantas for sharing knowledge, to moderator Riza, who guided this event attractively. Hopefully, this is useful for all of us. So thank you also, ladies and gentlemen, the committee and all parties involved in this event. We close this session and don't forget there is coming event in the other lecturing sessions. Thank you again, Prof. Almantas, and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Agung. Before this meeting end, I would like to inform to all of audience, don't forget to the tomorrow meeting, tomorrow lecture that will be Professor Takehito Otsuka will share knowledge about urban design. So don't miss it. I think it's very important agenda. And also for the next Friday, Prof. Almantas also will be with us again in the session of manuscript coaching. So please prepare your manuscript and don't miss that precious event. Okay. Once again, thank you very much for Prof. Almantas, for Pak Reza, for Pak Agung and Bu Yanti, and also for all the audience from undergraduate program, master program, and as well as from doctorate program. Thank you very much, and
Thank
see
you very
you
much, Wati. See you.
next time. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Prof. Al.
Thank you.